Jama-ah's Thapelo Ahmad was elected executive mayor in the city of Johannesburg today after the DA's Dr. Mpho Phalatse was ousted in a no-confidence motion. Ahmad received 138 votes. He was up against Action SA's Funzi Ngobeni, who garnered 46 votes, and his predecessor 81 votes. All right, let's speak a little bit more about these developments now with Professor Alex van der Heever, who is the chair in the field of Social Security Systems Administration and Management Studies at Wits School of Governance. A very good evening to you, Professor van der Heever, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Your reaction with, in particular, this candidate?
I think it's actually really sad. We've kind of gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. We've, I think, had a very, very strong candidate. We've got a city that's in difficulties because of prior mismanagement. And we now have a mayor, an executive mayor, who has absolutely no experience of running large organizations. And he's just been put in charge of a 73 billion rand a year organization. And who really does that? So I think there's a lot. So the political process itself does require some thinking. But if we had to put these candidates before a direct election, the question is whether this would be the outcome. And so I think we do have to begin looking at our particular model for electing executive mayors, as well as the whether or not our politics is actually driving toward coherent leadership, because this is extraordinarily dangerous for South Africa, because Johannesburg is an engine of growth, and we've just put people in charge who have no idea what they're doing.
So Jama-ah describes Ahmad as a politician who excels in self-governance and ethics, self-representation or designated groups, having knowledge of domestic public policy making and of legislation and national skills development strategy, saying that this obviously has implications for political performances. And so with these skills that have been proffered as what is the making of a good mayor in their view, are you saying that he doesn't even have an inkling of potential in bringing about good governance?
Not a chance. I mean, those are all qualities that are self-described. I don't know who this person is and where he comes from. And you would want to know, because you're actually putting somebody in charge of a major, major organization. So we've already seen what happens to organizations like Eskom when you put bad leadership in charge, to SABC itself, when you put people in charge who have absolutely no idea what they're doing. It is incredibly debilitating for an organization. And we've now had numerous changes in leadership. And this is now destabilizing our largest metro in South Africa. And the danger with this is that we're now going to face the possibility of disinvestment in the region. Gauteng has huge potential, but it can be destroyed. And with people who actually just don't know how to govern, it is going to have serious implications. And people who are not serious about governing. And just to note with this chap, who I must say I have no knowledge of in policy making or anything, and I work in the field, I have no idea where he comes from, is that in this particular area, we need to have powerful leadership. That is, and policy commitment. Now, if we think of it, where in the political dynamic over the past few years have we actually seen any of these changes in leadership related to policy discussions? There is absolutely nothing. There is no semblance of it. There is just a kind of power grab. And when you see that, it does raise serious concerns as to the motivations behind the leadership change, because this is a massive budget. I mean, 73 billion rand a year is a big pot of money. And at the beginning of a financial year, we've just put complete, people who have no real background, no real management capability, no knowledge of actually real policy in cities and general government. We've just put them in charge of that. And we've got a city that's already been in great difficulties from a checkered past. And we really have to kind of dig this city out and change its direction. And now we're sitting with this until we have another election. And unfortunately, to have changes in leadership which don't go back to the people, this is a real problem.
So you're speculating about or saying we should be asking the question, what is the motive behind these sudden leadership changes? And I paraphrase, but you've pretty much described Thapelo Ahmad as an unknown entity who is unlikely to have any positive impact. But it is understood that he's going to be holding the fort for 6 months until the ANC and EFF sort out their negotiations, particularly over who should be mayor of Ekurhuleni. Could this be part of the strategy to have somebody who is not compelling, who isn't really going to make much of a dent?
So why would you do that? Why would you take a 73 billion rand a year city, put it under token novice leadership for 6 months while you decide how to carve up the cake between the ANC and the EFF? That is not governance. And that has nothing to do with good policy. That has to do with power grabs. So if that is what that's what the motivation is, it's got nothing to do with what the citizens of Johannesburg want in delivery. Why would you disrupt the existing mayor for 6 months? Why not leave the existing mayor in there while you decide on your crooked strategies? Leave the mayor, let them carry on. But to put somebody there in charge because they expected to do nothing in a city like this, it only makes sense within the context of patronage politics. And that is really concerning. It means that we have no policy and we have a major city adrift while people decide how they're going to sort of pick the bones off the city. That's not right. Right. And the citizens basically have a right to be extremely angry at this point because this is not government for people and by people. This is basically an abomination of governance.
Talk to us about the complexities of city governance and what approach should be adopted if we're talking about effective leadership, effective governance, particularly when we talk about urban governance. We know that migratory patterns are showing that we're receiving more and more people. So it does need a concerted effort to plan for that.
If there were any city in South Africa that needed to have the smartest people in the room in charge of the process, it is Johannesburg. Because the population of Johannesburg is increasing by about 20% every 10 years. There's no other city in South Africa and in the region that's growing at that rate. If you don't know how to deal with the absorption of such large populations and such rapid change, we are going to fail as a city, and we already are failing. So what we have as a problem is that our governance process, our democratic process should be allowing, it doesn't matter, there can be differences in policy and differences in approach, but you require strong leadership. And coalition governments, if you look at how they operate throughout Europe, tend to generate good leadership, even if there are differences in approach. But what we're seeing here is a massive drop in the quality of leadership when it needs to be of a very high standard. And we're getting this turnover and disruption to leadership when in fact you need a steady ship and you need really competent people. Now, if the ANC and EFF coalition were actually generating good leaders and putting them in charge, that's a different story. But what we're seeing is somebody like this. We're seeing Van Rooyen's being put in charge of major organizations. Now, cities are also incredibly complex. The whole infrastructure, the design of that, how urbanization is planned, how housing is planned, how the whole structure of the city is planned over time and dealt with and managed, requires a considerable capability in the organization. And if you see a decline in the organizational capability of Johannesburg, you will see a decline in being able to manage complex problems. Now, Eskom is dealing with complex problems. And when they collapse leadership in Eskom, it takes a while and then it drifts down. And then to turn that ship around is incredibly difficult because the complexity of the problems can't just be turned around even when you start to change the leadership in a positive direction. It takes years to get it right. And now what we're doing is we're basically degrading the leadership function of Johannesburg at a critical period in time. And this is not what the democratic process should allow. It should be encouraging strong leadership and incentivizing parties to put people who can do the job in charge, not some, some person just picked out of the, picked off the street almost and put in this position because they are expected to do nothing for 6 months. This is not right. So I think that the problem is that we're going to lose control of the complexity of Johannesburg, and we can't afford to do that in a city like this.
Professor Alex van der Heever, thank you so much for speaking to us, governance expert. Professor Alex van der Heever sharing his views about these developments.